What would you do if the love of your life was hiding a massive secret, one that could change everything? Could your relationship survive the ultimate test of trust? These are the questions David, a self-made millionaire, had to face when he decided to conceal his true wealth from his fiancée, Emma, in a daring attempt to test her love for him. What followed was a journey of discovery, heartbreak, and profound lessons about trust and the nature of genuine connection. In today's story, we'll uncover the extraordinary journey of a man who had everything but doubted the intentions of those closest to him. Driven by his fear of being loved for the wrong reasons, David chose to live a double life, hiding his fortune from the woman he hoped to marry. But little did he know that this test of love would not only reveal Emma's true intentions, but also shatter his faith in relationships. Whether you've ever questioned someone's intentions or felt unsure about the depth of a connection, this story will resonate deeply. It reflects a universal truth about the challenges we face when seeking authentic love in a world often driven by appearances and materialism. Let's dive into David's story and uncover the lessons he learned about trust, love, and what it truly means to be vulnerable in relationships. Meet David, a self-made millionaire who had built his empire from the ground up. Born into a humble family, he learned the value of hard work early in life. Over the years, he climbed the ladder of success with grit and determination, eventually becoming the owner of a thriving tech company. By his mid-30s, David had it all: wealth, prestige, and a lifestyle many could only dream of. But beneath his confident exterior lay a gnawing insecurity that no amount of money could erase. David had watched his friends in the elite social circle fall victim to relationships built on deceit and material gain. Marriages crumbled when fortunes waned, and friendships dissolved when investments soured. He couldn't help but wonder, was it even possible to find someone who would love him for who he was rather than for what he had? Enter Emma. She was radiant, charming, and full of life, the kind of woman who could light up a room just by walking in. David was smitten from the moment they met. She worked as an event planner, living a modest yet fulfilling life. Their whirlwind romance blossomed quickly, and within a year, David was convinced she was the one. But as the relationship deepened, so did David's doubts. He couldn't shake the fear that Emma might be more interested in his lavish lifestyle than in him. While she never outright displayed materialistic tendencies, David's past experiences made him suspicious of anyone who entered his life. In a moment of vulnerability, David confided in his best friend, Mark, about his fears. Mark, a fellow entrepreneur, suggested an unconventional solution. Why not hide your wealth for a while? See how she reacts when she thinks you're just an ordinary guy. The idea seemed absurd at first, but the more David thought about it, the more sense it made. Determined to uncover the truth, David devised a plan. He told Emma he was going through financial difficulties due to some failed investments. To sell the story, he swapped his tailored suits for thrift store clothes, moved out of his sprawling mansion into a modest one-bedroom apartment, and sold his luxury car for an old sedan. His once opulent lifestyle was stripped down to the bare essentials. Emma, to her credit, didn't flinch when David shared his situation. She reassured him that she was there for him, no matter what. Her words seemed genuine, but David knew actions would speak louder. This marked the beginning of an emotional journey, one that would reveal more about Emma and himself than he ever anticipated. The new life they shared was a stark contrast to David's usual world of high-stakes deals and exclusive events. Their dates shifted from fine dining and private yacht rides to quiet evenings cooking dinner together in the small apartment. David found himself both relieved and anxious. On one hand, Emma didn't seem to mind the change. On the other, he couldn't help but scrutinize her every move, looking for signs of dissatisfaction. The real test came when David introduced Emma to his new reality. He suggested cutting back on expenses, canceling weekend getaways, and even limiting gifts to special occasions. Emma adapted without complaint, but David still questioned her motives. Was she genuinely content, or was she biding her time in hopes that his fortunes would bounce back? As time passed, the tension began to mount. David felt trapped by his own experiment. While he wanted to believe Emma's love was pure, he couldn't ignore the lingering doubts. Every time she showed kindness or understanding, he wondered if it was an act. Every time she expressed frustration, he feared it was because of the missing luxuries. Unbeknownst to David, Emma also had her own concerns. She noticed how guarded and distant he had become, and she couldn't understand why. The man who once swept her off her feet with grand gestures now seemed hesitant to open up, as though he was hiding something. What started as a test of love was quickly spiraling into a test of trust, a test neither of them realized they were failing. David's transition into his new persona was both liberating and unsettling. He traded his high-powered executive image for a more subdued version of himself. His once perfectly tailored suits now hung in the back of the closet, replaced by simple jeans and plain shirts. The sleek, modern apartment he once called home was left behind in favor of a modest one-bedroom unit with outdated furniture and a leaky faucet. Emma, to David's surprise, embraced the changes, or so it seemed. "It doesn't matter where we live or what we have," she said with a reassuring smile. "As long as we're together, we'll make it work." Her words brought him comfort, yet deep down, he couldn't ignore the nagging doubt that lingered. Was her love truly unconditional, or was she just playing along? The first few weeks passed smoothly. Emma adjusted to their new life without complaint, finding joy in simple things like cooking meals together at home or watching movies on an old TV. She even went out of her way to support David, offering words of encouragement about his supposed financial struggles. For a brief moment, David allowed himself to believe that perhaps she truly loved him for who he was. But as time went on, subtle cracks began to form. One evening, David suggested they grab dinner at a local diner instead of the upscale restaurants they used to frequent. Emma hesitated before agreeing, her smile faltering for just a moment. "Sure," she said, "as long as we're together, right?" Her tone was light, but David couldn't help but wonder if there was disappointment hidden beneath her words. Then came the day Emma met David's new circle of friends, colleagues from his past who were also playing along to help him maintain the facade. These friends were warm and welcoming, but lived modest lives compared to the elite socialites Emma had grown accustomed to. She was polite, but David noticed her glances at their worn furniture and budget-friendly outfits. Was she judging them, or was he overanalyzing? The doubts weighed heavily on David. He began to question whether he was being fair to Emma. Could anyone truly thrive under constant scrutiny? Was he sabotaging a potentially beautiful relationship by creating a situation where Emma couldn't win? Meanwhile, Emma started noticing changes in David, too. He was quieter, more reserved, and often seemed lost in thought. At times, she caught him watching her, as though trying to decipher her every move. It made her uneasy, but she chose not to confront him. She believed in supporting him through tough times, even if she didn't fully understand what was going on. David's internal conflict grew as the days turned into weeks. On one hand, he told himself this test was necessary to protect his heart. On the other, he couldn't ignore the guilt that crept in. He claimed to love Emma, yet here he was deceiving her in the most fundamental way. Was he really any better than the people he feared? The test began to take a toll on their relationship. While Emma tried to remain supportive, small tensions started to surface. She seemed less enthusiastic about their budget-friendly outings and occasionally made offhand comments like, "I miss when we could just splurge on a nice weekend getaway." Though she never directly complained, David picked up on the subtle shifts in her behavior. One evening, the tension boiled over. Emma asked David why he seemed so distant lately. "You're not the same person I fell in love with," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "I know you're going through a lot, but I feel like you're shutting me out." David struggled to respond, torn between his desire to reassure her and his commitment to maintaining the test. "I'm just trying to figure things out," he said vaguely. Emma didn't press further, but the hurt in her eyes was undeniable. As the days wore on, David began to see the consequences of his actions more clearly. He realized that his experiment was no longer just about testing Emma's love. It was also a reflection of his own insecurities. He questioned why he had felt the need to go to such lengths to protect himself. Was it because of his past experiences, or was it something deeper? David also started to appreciate Emma's resilience. Despite the cracks that had begun to show, she hadn't abandoned him. She continued to stand by his side, even as the relationship grew strained. Her actions forced him to confront a difficult truth. Perhaps the problem wasn't Emma's love, but his inability to trust it. Yet, the more he reflected, the more he wondered if the test was backfiring. Was he pushing her away by doubting her sincerity? Was he turning into the very person he feared? Someone who couldn't see beyond material things to recognize true love? David was at a crossroads. He had set out to test Emma, but now he was the one being tested by his own fears, his own insecurities, and his own capacity to trust. David had tried his best to push his doubts aside, to give Emma the benefit of the doubt, but a gnawing unease lingered in the back of his mind. He knew he couldn't keep up the charade forever. The truth would eventually have to come out, but it seemed fate had other plans for how that moment would arrive. The catalyst came one evening when David returned home earlier than expected from a meeting with his modest friends. As he approached the apartment door, he heard Emma's voice on the phone, her tone sharp and exasperated. Curiosity got the better of him, and he paused, listening from just outside. "I can't keep doing this," Emma said, her frustration evident. "I thought David had potential, but he's just stuck. He's a good guy, but let's be real. What kind of future can we have if he's barely making ends meet? I've been wasting my time on someone who can't even provide the basics." David's breath caught in his throat. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He felt a wave of disbelief, followed by a deep, aching sadness. Emma's voice continued, each word cutting deeper than the last. "Maybe I should start looking for something better," she added. "I've given him enough time to prove himself, but it's clear he's not going anywhere. I need more than just love to build a life." David stood frozen, his mind racing. He had wanted clarity about Emma's intentions, but this revelation left him reeling. All this time, he had hoped his fears were unfounded, that Emma's love for him was genuine and untainted by material expectations. But now, the illusion was shattered. As Emma ended the call, David quietly stepped away, pretending he had just arrived. He opened the door, his heart pounding, and greeted her as if nothing had happened. She smiled at him, the same warm smile he had once found so reassuring. Now it felt hollow. That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying Emma's words in his mind. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming. He had built his relationship with Emma on the belief that love could transcend wealth and status, but now he questioned everything. Was their entire relationship a lie? David also felt a pang of guilt. He had orchestrated this test, intentionally hiding his wealth to uncover Emma's true feelings. In doing so, had he created the very situation he feared? Was it fair to expect unconditional love when he had kept such a significant part of his life hidden? The next morning, David decided he needed clarity, not just for himself, but for Emma as well. He resolved to reveal the truth about his wealth, not as an act of revenge, but as a way to end the deception and find closure. He invited Emma out to dinner at a modest cafe they often frequented. As they sat down, David noticed her glancing at the menu, her expression unreadable. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before speaking. "Emma," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion, "there's something I need to tell you. I haven't been entirely honest with you about who I am." Emma looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly in confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked. David hesitated, then continued. "The life I've been living, the apartment, the job, the finances, it's all been a facade. The truth is, I'm not struggling to make ends meet. I'm wealthy, very wealthy." Emma's eyes widened in shock. For a moment, she said nothing, her expression a mix of surprise and disbelief. "What are you talking about?" she finally asked. "I own a multi-million-dollar business," David explained. "I've built a life of financial success, but I've always feared that people would love me for my money rather than for who I am. That's why I hid my wealth, to see if our relationship was based on something real." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's face shifted from shock to something more complex, an expression David couldn't quite read. "You lied to me?" she said, her voice trembling. "All this time, you've been testing me?" David nodded, his gaze steady. "I had to know, Emma. I had to be sure that your feelings for me were genuine. Emma's reaction was not what David expected. Instead of anger or guilt, she seemed hurt and defensive. So, all this time you didn't trust me? She said, her voice rising. You assumed the worst about me, and now you're blaming me for being upset? David felt his chest tighten. Emma, I overheard your conversation last night, he admitted. You said you felt like you were wasting your time on me. I needed to understand where we stood. Emma's face turned red, and for a moment, David thought she might deny it. Instead, she shook her head, her expression one of frustration. You put me in an impossible position, she said. Do you know how hard it's been trying to support someone who's constantly holding back? I've been trying, David, but I'm only human. And yes, I want stability. I won't apologize for that. The conversation ended with no clear resolution. Emma left the cafe, leaving David to grapple with his emotions. On one hand, he felt vindicated. His test had revealed Emma's true intentions. On the other hand, he couldn't ignore the role he had played in creating this outcome. That night, David made a difficult decision. He realized that the trust between them had been irreparably damaged, not just because of Emma's words, but because of his own actions. If their relationship had been built on a foundation of doubt and deception, how could it ever truly thrive? David knew that confronting the truth wouldn't be easy, but he also understood it was necessary. He spent the next few days reflecting on everything that had happened: Emma's words, her actions, and his own role in orchestrating the deception. While her intentions had deeply hurt him, he couldn't ignore the fact that his test had been born from his own fears and insecurities. Determined to find closure, David decided to reveal his wealth openly and face whatever came next. He planned a dinner at one of the city's most luxurious five-star restaurants, a place he had deliberately avoided during the time he was hiding his true lifestyle. This time, there would be no thrift store clothes or modest settings. He wanted Emma to see the real him, no masks, no tests. On the evening of the dinner, David arrived in his luxury car, dressed in a tailored suit that exuded confidence and success. As he waited for Emma, he felt a mix of emotions: anticipation, fear, and a strange sense of relief. For months, he had carried the burden of his secret, but tonight he would finally let it go. Emma arrived shortly after, looking surprised by the lavish setting. David, what's going on? She asked, glancing around the opulent restaurant. David gestured for her to sit, offering a small smile. There's something I need to share with you, he said, his tone calm but serious. Over the course of the meal, David revealed everything: the truth about his wealth, the reasons behind his decision to hide it, and the test he had put their relationship through. He didn't sugarcoat anything, admitting his fears and insecurities while also expressing his disappointment in what he had overheard. Emma listened in stunned silence, her expression shifting from shock to anger and then to something more vulnerable. I can't believe you did this, she said, her voice trembling. You lied to me for months, all because you didn't trust me. Do you know how humiliating this feels? David nodded, his gaze steady. I understand why you feel that way, Emma, and I take responsibility for my actions. But I need you to understand why I did it. I needed to know if what we had was real, if you loved me for who I am, not for what I have. Emma's eyes filled with tears. You don't get it, do you? You put me in a position where I felt like I had to carry the weight of everything. If you had been honest from the start, none of this would have happened. David sighed, feeling the weight of her words. You're right, he admitted. I should have trusted you enough to be honest. But I also can't ignore what I heard. Your words confirmed my worst fears, Emma. I wanted to believe in us. But now I realize that trust and love can't survive in a relationship built on doubt and deception. Emma reached across the table, her tone shifting to desperation. David, I made a mistake. I was frustrated and venting. That doesn't mean I don't love you. Please, give me another chance. For a moment, David hesitated. He had loved Emma deeply, and part of him wanted to believe her. But another part of him knew that the foundation of their relationship had been irreparably damaged. Trust, once broken, is incredibly hard to rebuild. I care about you, Emma, he said softly. But I think we've both learned something important through this. Love isn't about tests or secrets. It's about honesty, mutual respect, and trust. And right now, I don't think we have that. Emma's tears spilled over, and she nodded reluctantly. "I wish things had been different," she whispered. "So do I," David replied. The dinner ended on a bittersweet note. As David drove home that night, he felt an overwhelming sense of relief mixed with sadness. Letting go of Emma was painful, but it was also the first step toward healing. He had learned a valuable lesson about love, that it cannot be forced, tested, or manipulated. True love must be given freely and without conditions. In the weeks that followed, David focused on rebuilding his life. He poured his energy into his business and spent more time with friends and family, who reminded him of the importance of authentic connections. He also began attending therapy, determined to confront his own insecurities and fears about relationships. Over time, David found peace. He no longer felt the need to hide his wealth or test the intentions of those around him. Instead, he resolved to approach future relationships with honesty and an open heart. If love was meant to be, it would thrive on its own merits, not because of a test, but because of genuine connection. One day, while walking through the park, David caught sight of a couple laughing together on a bench. The simplicity of their joy reminded him of what he truly sought, a love that wasn't influenced by wealth, status, or expectations, but one that was pure and unshakable. As he continued his walk, David smiled to himself. He didn't know what the future held, but he was confident in one thing. He was ready to embrace it with clarity, confidence, and an open heart. Months after the breakup, David's life had taken on a new rhythm, one centered on growth, self-discovery, and genuine relationships. While the pain of losing Emma lingered for a while, it eventually gave way to a sense of peace. He began to focus on the things that truly mattered to him: his family, his close friends, and his personal well-being. David also realized the importance of opening his heart to the possibility of love again, but this time without fear or pretense. His wealth remained a part of his life, but it no longer defined how he approached relationships. He decided that any future partner would meet him as he truly was, with no secrets or hidden agendas. One crisp autumn afternoon, David met someone who would change his life. Her name was Claire, and their paths crossed at a local charity event where they were both volunteering. Claire wasn't impressed by luxury or status. She valued kindness, empathy, and shared purpose. As they got to know each other, David found himself drawn to Claire's authenticity. Their connection was effortless, built on shared laughter, deep conversations, and a mutual respect for one another. This time, there were no tests or games. David was completely transparent about his life from the beginning, and Claire embraced him for who he was, not for what he had. For the first time in a long while, David felt what it was like to love and be loved without conditions. He discovered that the real test of love wasn't in orchestrated scenarios or concealed truths, but in the everyday moments of trust, understanding, and vulnerability. David's journey taught him one of life's most profound lessons. Trust and authenticity are the cornerstones of any meaningful relationship. While wealth and status can complicate matters, they are never the true foundation of love. He came to understand that his initial fears, though valid, had blinded him to the importance of honesty. By testing Emma, he had betrayed his own values and eroded the trust they had shared. It wasn't just Emma who had failed the test. David realized that his own insecurities had played a significant role in the relationship's downfall. Moving forward, David vowed never to let fear dictate his actions again. He recognized that love, at its core, is about vulnerability and acceptance. To truly connect with someone, both parties must be willing to share their whole selves, flaws and all. This insight extended beyond romantic relationships. David also began fostering more authentic connections with friends, colleagues, and family members. He stopped hiding behind the facade of wealth and allowed others to see the person behind the success. David's story invites all of us to reflect on our own relationships and values. Do we approach love with openness and trust, or do we let our insecurities shape our actions? Are we authentic with those we care about, or do we hide behind masks, afraid of rejection? The truth is, no relationship is perfect, and no one is immune to doubts. But the key to building lasting connections lies in transparency and mutual respect. Testing someone's love might offer temporary reassurance, but it can never replace the deeper bond that comes from genuine trust. So, if you find yourself questioning a relationship, ask yourself, are you being honest, not just with your partner, but with yourself? Authentic love doesn't require games or tests. It flourishes in an environment of openness, vulnerability, and shared purpose. David's journey reminds us of a simple but profound truth. Wealth might attract attention, but it's the heart that sustains a relationship. Love built on trust and authenticity is unshakable, while love built on doubt will always falter. As you navigate your own path, remember that the greatest treasures in life aren't found in bank accounts or material possessions. They're found in the connections we build, the trust we nurture, and the love we give and receive. In the end, David found peace and the promise of a brighter future because he chose to let go of fear and embrace authenticity. His story is a testament to the power of trusting the journey and trusting the heart.